There comes a moment when a man looks in the mirror and doesn't recognize the person staring back. He's tired, distracted, maybe even successful, but hollow, not broken, just numb. It's not depression, it's not laziness, it's disconnection from who he used to be, from who he could have become, from who he's meant to become. If that hits something inside you, you're exactly who this story is for. He sat in the car staring at the steering wheel like it had answers. The air was still, not quiet, just heavy, like something had been said but not really heard. His phone buzzed once more on the passenger seat, screen glowing with a name that used to mean warmth. Now it just meant ache. He didn't pick it up. She had left a few hours earlier, not with a bang, no screaming, no doors slammed or glasses shattered, just a pause in her voice when she said, "I can't feel you anymore." Like she was describing the weather, not ending a chapter. He thought about replying, about asking what that meant, what he could fix, what he'd missed. But deep down he knew. She hadn't fallen out of love with him, Sam. She'd just grown tired of waiting for him to show up. Not physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually. The kind of presence no calendar could schedule. He drove to nowhere, not even sure why. Some part of him thought movement might shake the fog off, but you can't outrun absence. It rides shotgun. For hours, he cycled through all the mental gymnastics. Should he fight for her? Should he apologize for being so numb, as she called it? Should he blame her or himself? Then, at a red light, something odd happened. He didn't cry. He didn't rage. He just went still, not out of peace, but exhaustion. He realized he had no one to perform for anymore, no role to play, just himself. And that silence, raw and unscripted, was more terrifying than any breakup. And in that silence, he heard something he hadn't in years, his own mind, uncluttered, his own pain, honest, his own voice whispering, "Maybe this isn't about her leaving. Maybe it's about you finally arriving." He parked near an empty field and stepped out. The wind was cold, not brutally, just enough to make you notice your skin again. And for the first time in a long time, he stood there without checking his phone, without refreshing a feed, without needing someone else to validate his existence. He remembered something he read years ago. Seneca, maybe, or Epictetus. Didn't matter. It went something like, "You suffer more in imagination than in reality." Back then, he thought it was poetic. Now, it felt like prophecy. He had suffered so much. By rehearsing future betrayals, reliving past mistakes, replaying conversations with different outcomes, he wasn't living. He was editing a life that never fully got written. So he breathed, just one full breath. And for a moment, the pain didn't vanish. But it didn't rule him either. He walked, each step like shedding a layer. The guilt, the overthinking, the desperate need to be needed. Not because he had some new philosophy or plan, just because he was tired of being a stranger in his own body. When you stop trying to win someone back, sometimes you find your way back to yourself. He didn't become wise overnight. There were still mornings he'd wake up with her name in his chest. Still moments when a scent or a song would yank him back into memory like a cruel trick. But now he welcomed it, not because it felt good, but because it was real. It reminded him he had once loved, he had once lost, and he was still here. That was intelligence. Not GPA scores, not clever quotes, but the courage to feel fully and not let it break you. That night, he sat alone. No TV, no background noise, just a notebook and a pen. And he wrote one line: "Emotional intelligence begins the moment you stop running from yourself." The next morning wasn't a revelation. It wasn't romantic or cinematic. It was quiet and almost dull. He woke up, made coffee, and stared at the cup. The bitterness sat heavy on his tongue, but at least it was real. No texts, no "I miss you," no apologies, just space. He grabbed the notebook again, not because he wanted to write some genius thoughts. He just needed somewhere to put the noise. The kind of noise that doesn't come from outside but from within. Regret, longing, doubt, all swirling. He wrote one question: what is in my control right now? And for some reason, that single line felt like an anchor in a storm. Not how do I get her back, not what if I never feel love again. Just what is in my control right now. He had read about it once, Epictetus, the Stoic slave turned philosopher. The idea that we don't suffer from events themselves, but from our judgment of them. That if we focus only on what is ours to command, our thoughts, our actions, our attitude, we become unshakable. He wasn't unshakable yet, not even close. But for the first time, he could feel the chaos narrowing, like someone dimmed the volume on the world, just enough to hear his own clarity. He showered, not to feel better, but because he was still alive, still responsible for this body, this breath, this day. That, he realized, was lesson one. You don't need motivation. You need movement. Motivation will lie to you, but movement, action, however small, is honest. You can't think your way out of heartbreak, but you can act your way into peace. He went for a walk, no music, no distraction, just footsteps and wind. He noticed things: a cracked sidewalk, a child crying and then laughing, a crow watching him like it knew something he didn't. Every time a thought about her came up, what she was doing, who she was with, he didn't push it away. He just asked, is this useful right now? Most times, the answer was no. He remembered another Stoic line, one that had slipped past him before but now landed like a whisper in his spine. It's not things that disturb us, but our opinion about them. She didn't destroy him, she left. That's a fact. What he did with it, that was the story he was writing now. He started to feel space between him and the pain, like it wasn't suffocating him anymore, just sitting beside him, and strangely, that felt okay. Would you like me to continue with part 3 now? I'll carry on deepening the story, weaving in the next Stoic lessons naturally. Each part will build emotional gravity while offering genuine meditative insight. So by the end, the viewer doesn't just learn, they feel. 3 days passed. He hadn't spoken to her, not because he was trying to prove anything, but because the silence no longer felt empty. It felt necessary. Every time he was tempted to text her, to check in, to just say hi, he paused. He wrote the urge down instead, labeled it, watched it, almost like a scientist observing a specimen, not judging it, just studying its patterns. And over time, he realized something that startled him. He didn't miss her. He missed who he thought he was with her. The way her laughter made him feel important. The way her body made him feel wanted. The way her attention made him feel real. But those things weren't love. They were reflections, mirrors, echoes of his own hunger. Lesson 2. Sometimes what we grieve isn't the person, but the illusion they helped us maintain. That one hurt. But it also set him free. You weren't in love with them. You were in love with who you got to be when they were around. And now, stripped of that reflection, he was being asked a harder question. Who are you when no one is looking? Morning came differently now. No frantic checking of the phone, no scanning for her name, no imaginary conversations. He brewed coffee like a ritual, slowly, deliberately, as if the quiet itself had become sacred. And that's when it hit him. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting. Not waiting for a message, not waiting for a breakthrough, not waiting for life to deliver something. He was simply being, and that stillness, that quiet inner presence, it didn't make him soft. It made him alert. Stillness isn't weakness. It's how you learn to hear yourself again. Lesson 4. When you no longer chase, you begin to attract. Not just people, but clarity, focus, strength. He started noticing patterns. The way his mind used to chase drama just to feel alive. The way he'd say yes out of fear of being forgotten. The way he'd perform masculinity instead of embodying it. None of that was real. It was noise, learned from the world, the media, the wounded men around him. He remembered another line from the Stoics, this time from Epictetus. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Damn, all that time he blamed her for his pain. Maybe his mind had been in on it too. So he started training himself differently, not at the gym, not just physically. He began training for emotional control. When irritation showed up, he didn't fight it. He sat with it. When self-doubt whispered, he wrote it down, saw it for what it was. When the past came knocking, he didn't invite it in, just watched it through the window and let it pass. Lesson 5. The man who masters his emotional reactions becomes immune to manipulation. And manipulation isn't always external. Sometimes it's your own mind manipulating you into staying small, into avoiding discomfort, into believing stories that no longer serve you, into craving chaos because silence feels unfamiliar. But the more he sat in silence, the more he began to recognize himself, not as who he'd been taught to be, but as something quieter, simpler, still. One afternoon, he walked past a group of men arguing loudly on the sidewalk. One guy bumped into him on purpose. 6 months ago, he would have reacted, chest out, ego on fire, ready for battle. But now, he just looked the man in the eye. No tension, no fear, no approval seeking, just presence. And that presence said everything. I'm not afraid of you, but I'm not afraid to walk away either. That was lesson 6. You don't need to defend your dignity to anyone. Quiet self-respect says more than volume ever could. And as he walked away, calm, unrattled, he realized this wasn't about becoming invincible. This was about becoming unshakable. Would you like to continue to part 5? The next chapter will go deeper into intelligence, not just as IQ or knowledge, but as wisdom, rooted in restraint, detachment, and vision. He remembered a story he'd read. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, writing in his personal journal at night, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, today I will meet people who are meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they cannot tell good from evil." That hit him differently now. Not because he was angry at her, but because he realized how much time he'd spent expecting people to behave the way he thought they should. Love me, stay with me, be loyal, be honest, be who I need. But she wasn't those things, not anymore, and maybe she never was. And instead of resenting her, he just let it drop. No moral judgment, no revenge fantasy, no self-blame, just release. This was lesson 3. Don't tie your peace to how others behave. Tie it to how you respond. He started journaling every day, not perfectly, not with eloquence, but truthfully. The notebook wasn't therapy. It was reflection. And reflection, he realized, was what most people run from. Not because it's hard, but because it's honest. And honesty doesn't flatter your ego. It unmasks it. One night he wrote, "I was more obsessed with being loved than being loving." He stared at that line for 10 minutes, closed the book, sat in the stillness. Something inside him cracked, and in that crack, light seeped through. He didn't feel broken. He felt awake, not healed, not triumphant, just aware. Morning came differently now. No frantic checking of the phone, no scanning for her name, no imaginary conversations. He brewed coffee like a ritual, slowly, deliberately, as if the quiet itself had become sacred. And that's when it hit him. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting, not waiting for a message, not waiting for a breakthrough, not waiting for life to deliver something. He was simply being. And that stillness, that quiet inner presence, it didn't make him soft, it made him alert. Rehook. Stillness isn't weakness, it's how you learn to hear yourself again. Lesson 4. When you no longer chase, you begin to attract. Not just people, but clarity, focus, strength. He started noticing patterns. The way his mind used to chase drama just to feel alive. The way he'd say yes out of fear of being forgotten. the way he'd perform masculinity instead of embodying it. None of that was real. It was noise, learned from the world, the media, the wounded men around him. He remembered another line from the Stoics, this time from Epictetus. If someone succeeds in provoking you, realize that your mind is complicit in the provocation. Damn, all that time he blamed her for his pain. Maybe his mind had been in on it too. So he started training himself differently, not at the gym, not just physically. He began training for emotional control. When irritation showed up, he didn't fight it. He sat with it. When self-doubt whispered, he wrote it down, saw it for what it was. When the past came knocking, he didn't invite it in, just watched it through the window and let it pass. Lesson 5. The man who masters his emotional reactions becomes immune to manipulation. And manipulation isn't always external. Sometimes it's your own mind manipulating you into staying small, into avoiding discomfort, into believing stories that no longer serve you, into craving chaos because silence feels unfamiliar. But the more he sat in silence, the more he began to recognize himself, not as who he'd been taught to be, but as something quieter, simpler, still. One afternoon, he walked past a group of men arguing loudly on the sidewalk. One guy bumped into him on purpose. 6 months ago, he would have reacted, chest out, ego on fire, ready for battle. But now, he just looked the man in the eye. No tension, no fear, no approval seeking, just presence. And that presence said everything. I'm not afraid of you, but I'm not afraid to walk away either. That was lesson 6. You don't need to defend your dignity to anyone. Quiet self-respect says more than volume ever could. And as he walked away, calm, unrattled, he realized this wasn't about becoming invincible. This was about becoming unshakable. Would you like to continue to part 5? The next chapter will go deeper into intelligence, not just as IQ or knowledge, but as wisdom rooted in restraint, detachment, and vision. Later that night, he found an old photo of himself taken years ago in his 20s, shirtless on a beach, flashing a wide, almost desperate grin, surrounded by people, yet the loneliness in his eyes bled through the smile. He stared at that version of himself, not with pity, but with understanding. That boy thought intelligence was being clever, saying the right thing at the right time, outwitting others, being impressive. But real intelligence, it wasn't showy. It was quiet, patient, and often invisible. Rehook. Intelligence is not how loud your thoughts are. It's how still your mind can stay while chaos surrounds you. Lesson 7. Your emotional stability is the highest form of intelligence. You can read books, collect degrees, learn systems, but if a single text message can break you, if one rejection can unravel you, then what use is all that knowledge? He began to see. Every Stoic lesson wasn't about becoming more, it was about needing less validation, less chaos, less chasing. Lesson 8. True intellect is measured by what you can endure in silence. No applause, no recognition, no one cheering, just you and the storm within you, and your ability to sit with it, breathe with it, endure it without breaking character. That's when growth becomes irreversible. He remembered a morning back when things were worse, where he sat in his car, unable to move, paralyzed by decisions, terrified of change, shaking with anxiety, and no one knew, because sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought in war zones. They're fought quietly, in kitchens, in bedrooms, in cars, by men who don't want to be saved, but who desperately want peace. Lesson 9. If you want to be powerful, become the man who brings peace with him everywhere. Not because you demand control, but because you've mastered yourself. And when you master yourself, people start to feel different around you. They become calmer, more honest, less performative. Not because you force it, but because your stillness invites theirs. One day at a cafe, a young man, maybe in his early 20s, sat beside him, nervous, twitchy, constantly checking his phone. After a while, the man blurted out, "Sorry, you just seem steady, like nothing phases you. How do you do that?" He didn't respond right away, just sipped his coffee. Then said, "I stopped chasing outcomes. I only chase character now." Lesson 10. You don't rise in life by making noise. You rise by making decisions that protect your peace. And peace isn't passive, it's not hiding, it's not avoiding. It's a decision, a discipline, a demand you place on yourself to not abandon your center no matter what's happening around you. That day he didn't feel wise, he didn't feel like a sage. He just felt clear. He didn't need more, he didn't need less. He just needed to remain, still, present, whole. And for the first time, intelligence wasn't about strategy or success. It was about becoming the kind of man who couldn't be moved, not by applause, not by rejection, not even by loss. Because he'd already returned to something deeper, himself. Weeks passed, then months. Life didn't magically become easier, but he responded differently. A coworker tried to sabotage him, he didn't retaliate. An old friend resurfaced, offering shallow apologies, he didn't engage. He received unexpected bad news, he breathed, responded, and let it pass. He no longer took pride in reacting quickly. He took pride in not reacting at all. Rehook. You can't outsmart chaos, but you can outgrow your need to respond to it. Lesson 11. The mind governed by ego is loud. The mind governed by wisdom is quiet. He used to think having the last word made him powerful. Now silence did more damage. He used to prove points, argue online. Now he simply watched, sipped his tea, and allowed foolishness to exhaust itself. He wasn't emotionless. He just stopped bleeding every time someone touched an old wound. He'd learned to tend to his mind the way a Stoic would tend to a garden. Not by force, but with presence, consistency, and quiet pruning. One rainy evening, walking home with a soaked jacket and cold fingers, he smiled, softly. Because years ago, this would have ruined his day. Now it was just water, just weather, and his peace remained untouched. Lesson 12. The man who makes peace with discomfort becomes unstoppable, not because he enjoys pain, but because he doesn't fear it anymore. He'd stopped negotiating with life, asking for comfort in exchange for effort. Instead, he accepted discomfort as part of the path, not an interruption of it. He remembered the Stoic line, "Don't wish for things to happen as you want. Wish for things to happen as they do, and you will be at peace." He didn't just understand it now, he embodied it. Lesson 13. Intelligence is knowing when to act. Wisdom is knowing when to wait. He no longer rushed clarity. He allowed silence to reveal things in its own time. He learned, some people return, some don't. Some storms pass, others stay. None of it dictates your worth. Only your response to it does. He no longer asked, "Why me?" He asked, "How can I respond in a way I won't regret later?" That question, simple, direct, saved him from 1,000 self-inflicted wounds. Lesson 14. The smarter you become, the less you need to explain yourself. He used to argue out of fear of being misunderstood, underestimated, unloved. Now he let people think what they wanted, because his peace was more valuable than being right in someone else's story. And that peace, it came not from perfection, but from alignment. He no longer betrayed his values just to be accepted. He no longer bent his truth to keep anyone comfortable. He stood quiet, resolute, and real, and it changed everything. Lesson 15. You don't need to conquer the world. You need to stop letting it conquer you. One morning before the sun had even risen, he sat by the window. No phone, no thoughts, just breath. He realized everything he'd been searching for, success, admiration, power, was never out there. It was always here, in stillness, in presence, in the choice to remain unmoved by what doesn't matter. And then, like fog lifting, he saw clearly intelligence wasn't the answer, stillness was the container, and peace was the reward. That's when he finally understood. He didn't need to be sharper, faster, more impressive. He just needed to be less reactive, more aligned, more whole. And in that realization, something inside him exhaled. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing anything, not love, not clarity, not even himself. He was simply here. He didn't outsmart the world. He outgrew the version of himself that tried to. And sometimes, that's the real victory.